Human arrogance dictates that we are the absolute pinnacle of evolution. We confidently assume that we are the very first advanced species to ever build a civilization on this planet. But what if, 300 million years ago, a highly advanced reptilian species built towering skyscrapers, drove cars, and fought massive global wars? Would we even know? The terrifying mathematical truth of geology says absolutely not. The Earth is a relentless, unforgiving planetary meat grinder. Zero physical evidence, no glass, no steel, no plastic would survive a 300 million year timeline. In this video, we are exploring the Silurian Hypothesis. From the illusion of deep time, to the geological delete button, to the microscopic invisible chemical spikes that might be the absolute only remaining proof of a civilization before us. To even begin to rigorously understand how an entire, heavily industrialized world could be completely and utterly swallowed by the crushing weight of time, we first have to violently shatter our own deeply flawed, incredibly limited human perception of history. We are, by our biological nature, utterly incapable of accurately comprehending the sheer, staggering, unimaginable scale of the Earth's actual physical age. Our spinning rocky planet is roughly 4.5 billion years old. Complex biological life has been actively walking, swimming, hunting, and crawling across its shifting surface for at least 400 million years. Now let us objectively look at our own aggressively fast timeline of human industrialization. We confidently went from riding in simple, wooden, horse-drawn carriages to violently detonating apocalyptic nuclear weapons and physically walking on the dusty surface of the moon in roughly 300 years. 3 centuries. In the grand, terrifying ledger of deep geological time, that is absolutely nothing. Now deeply consider the heavy stainless steel watch currently sitting tightly on your wrist, or the glowing glass screen of the modern device you are holding right now. They feel so remarkably permanent, so undeniably physically real. But to the sheer, crushing, molten weight of the Earth's churning mantle beneath you, they are just a temporary, fleeting arrangement of fragile atoms waiting impatiently to be violently melted down and repurposed. Let us drastically scale up our thinking to match the planet. What if a completely unknown, highly intelligent, fiercely innovative reptilian species evolved, heavily industrialized, and lived a booming, technologically advanced existence for an astonishing 100,000 years? What if this entire epic planet-spanning saga played out, reaching the absolute heights of technological supremacy, and then they went tragically, permanently extinct during the suffocating Carboniferous period, hundreds of millions of years before the very first primitive dinosaur even opened its eyes? Your rational brain instinctively wants to reject this wild possibility. It feels deeply wrong. But the cold, terrifying mathematics of deep time allow for it perfectly, without breaking a single rule of logic. 100,000 years of a booming, global, planet-spanning civilization would represent just 0.002% of the Earth's entire recorded history. It is a microscopic, almost completely invisible blink of a cosmic eye. An entire advanced species with their own bustling neon-lit cities, complex global politics, and devastating world-ending wars could have easily risen to absolute power and then fallen completely back into the dust, entirely unnoticed in the massive, undocumented geological gaps between our recognized eras. They would be ghosts. So the immense, infinitely stretching timeline easily allows for a prior highly advanced civilization to exist, but the human viewer's brain immediately and aggressively rejects this uncomfortable concept, because if they actually built massive, sprawling cities, surely we would have dug up at least one of their towering skyscrapers by now. We are deeply psychologically conditioned by our own brief triumphant history to firmly believe that human creations will last absolutely forever. We regularly dig up perfectly preserved ancient Roman iron swords from the mud and pristine Egyptian gold masks from the desert sand, so we naturally, arrogantly, assume that our physical things are permanently immune to being erased by the universe. But that is a complete, fundamental, and utter illusion of scale. Let us rigorously and clinically walk through the unforgiving, inescapable physics of material decay. If humanity mysteriously disappeared tomorrow, the massive reinforced steel beams supporting our highest, most iconic skyscrapers would aggressively oxidize and rust entirely into fine red powder in just a few short centuries. The incredibly strong tempered glass windows in our homes and towering office buildings would eventually crystallize, heavily degrade, and shatter violently into unrecognizable sand. Even our most stubborn, toxic, resilient plastics would slowly, inevitably break down into completely invisible microscopic polymers, washing harmlessly into the dark oceans. Look down right now at the solid concrete floor beneath your feet. You completely trust it to be perfectly stable and unmoving. But the ultimate, undisputed destroyer of ancient advanced civilizations isn't actually the slow march of time itself. It is the violently active, living, breathing planet. Enter the brutal, planet-reshaping reality of plate tectonics. The Earth's rocky crust is absolutely not a static, unmoving, permanent shell. It constantly, relentlessly operates exactly like a massive, violent, continuously churning conveyor belt of solid stone. Our planet aggressively and intentionally destroys all manufactured objects through a terrifying, unstoppable geological process called subduction. Deep underneath the crushing black weight of the world's oceans, there are massive, gaping subduction zones where immense tectonic plates furiously and violently collide in slow motion. Every few 100 million years, the heavy, ancient oceanic crust is violently pulled deep beneath the much lighter continental plates. It is then fed directly, forcefully down into the glowing, superheated magma of the Earth's boiling, highly pressurized mantle. This is the planet's ultimate, unyielding geological delete button. It simply does not matter if a prior, highly intelligent civilization built an enormous, sprawling megacity of unbreakable glass, a massive global interstate highway system of thick concrete, or a heavily shielded, practically indestructible nuclear reactor. If it was built and anchored on that ancient crust, it was mercilessly subjected to unimaginable, crushing geological pressure and intense, core-melting, apocalyptic heat. Everything they ever painstakingly built, absolutely every single microscopic piece of their physical legacy, would be melted completely back down into basic, formless, bubbling magma. The entire planetary slate is wiped entirely and permanently clean. The Earth violently and permanently destroys all manufactured objects over deep time. But if the massive buildings and steel bridges were completely melted down, what about the builders themselves? Surely an advanced global population of billions would leave behind millions of easily discoverable, deeply buried fossils. This is exactly where the famous, highly predictable dinosaur argument always violently rears its skeptical head.
Armchair critics fiercely point to the massive museums and confidently say, if we clearly have massive, perfectly articulated Tyrannosaurus rex bones safely secured in glass display cases from 65 million years ago, why wouldn't we have casually stumbled across at least one single fossilized bone from a highly advanced industrialized prior species? The answer to that question is deeply, profoundly unsettling.
We fundamentally and completely misunderstand the incredibly extreme, incredibly violent, nearly impossible rarity of the natural biological fossilization process. To successfully become a preserved geological fossil, a biological body must unfortunately die in a highly specific, extremely rare, practically engineered geological environment. It almost exclusively must be buried almost instantaneously in thick, anoxic, completely oxygen-free mud or deep, suffocating river silt directly before hungry, aggressive scavengers or voracious microscopic bacteria can even begin to touch the decaying flesh. Think deeply about your own physical reality. Your own body is heavily made of fragile calcium and soft water. When you eventually die, the damp, active soil in your local manicured cemetery will aggressively and systematically dissolve your entire complete skeleton into base, unrecognizable soil nutrients in a microscopic fraction of geological time. Fossilization is an incredibly rigid, heavily rigged biological lottery, and the stark mathematical odds of actually winning it are practically zero. Out of the literal billions upon billions of massive, heavy-boned Tyrannosaurus rexes that successfully lived, bred, and violently hunted on this planet over a staggering span of 2.5 million years, human paleontologists only have a few dozen reasonably complete skeletons to show for it. That is it. Now apply that exact same terrifying biological math to an intelligent, civilized, highly urbanized species. If a prior ancient civilization culturally chose to cleanly cremate their dead in fiery industrial ovens, buried them respectfully in modern, aerated, carefully managed cemeteries, or simply concentrated their massive, booming populations in dense, landlocked concrete cities far away from perfectly preserving river floodplains, the Earth's immense geological record would proudly retain exactly zero physical trace of their biology. If you just abruptly realized your own heavy bones are statistically guaranteed to be completely erased from the planet's fossil record forever, hit the like button right now so we know this actively shifted your perspective on life. No towering cities, no glowing technology, no buried bones. The physical, tangible erasure of their existence is completely mathematically absolute. But brilliant astrophysicists recently realized there is actually one invisible, unmeltable chemical fingerprint that simply cannot be violently subducted away, and it's the exact same fingerprint we are blindly leaving behind right now. So how exactly do highly trained modern scientists systematically and scientifically search for something they categorically know they will never physically see? They have to completely and entirely stop desperately looking for broken physical objects in the dirt, and they have to aggressively start looking purely for invisible isotopic chemistry locked inside the stone. To truly understand this radical shift in scientific thinking, we have to deeply analyze the Anthropocene, the current, completely unprecedented geological epoch that is entirely defined by intense, highly disruptive human activity. What exactly will our loud, booming, energy-hungry civilization realistically leave behind when the crushing tectonic plates eventually swallow our sprawling cities? When our massive, proud steel skyscrapers completely melt down into magma, our distinct, highly unnatural chemical signature stubbornly, permanently survives. Right at this exact fleeting second, as you deeply breathe in the invisible air immediately around you, you are actively inhaling the raw chemical exhaust of our entire globalized civilization.
We are rapidly, recklessly digging up and violently burning millions of years of deeply stored fossil fuels in a single, incredibly short century. This frantic, desperate burning is drastically and permanently shifting the delicate, natural, ancient ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13 deep within the Earth's global atmosphere. We are synthetically manufacturing millions of tons of entirely artificial nitrogen strictly to aggressively pump our agricultural fertilizer. We are violently, permanently creating heavily radioactive, highly unnatural plutonium isotopes through our endless, devastating underground nuclear weapon testing. This is exactly how you aggressively hunt for the elusive missing Silurians. You absolutely do not waste your precious time desperately looking for a buried rusted car chassis in the ancient dirt. You mathematically, clinically scan deep-time rock layers for a sudden, highly inexplicable massive geological spike in atmospheric carbon, extreme global temperature shifts, and highly unnatural synthetic chemical isotopes. If a massive, advanced, highly intelligent reptilian species successfully conquered the globe, aggressively burned massive amounts of stored planetary energy, and violently altered their global climate simply to power their booming runaway industry, it permanently and invisibly scars the microscopic chemistry of the deep sedimentary rock. It literally bakes the undeniable proof of their unnatural existence directly into the fabric of the stone itself. So the highly observant scientists meticulously mapping the planet knew exactly what the specific, highly unnatural chemical signature of an ancient, hyper-industrialized civilization would mathematically look like if it was hidden deep in the dirt. And when they finally checked the Earth's deep, undisturbed geological record, scanning through millions of years of compressed ocean sediment, they actually found one.
But the deeply unsettling, deeply compelling Silurian hypothesis heavily forces us to look completely objectively at that exact same hard chemical data, to confidently stare blindly at the massive, aggressive red line aggressively spiking on the geological graph, and confidently ask the truly chilling, world-altering, deeply uncomfortable question. Is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum actually a terrible, entirely natural, incredibly tragic planetary disaster? Or is it literally the dark, choking chemical exhaust fumes of a booming, ancient civilization that burned far too bright, violently and permanently altered their fragile climate, and ultimately went tragically, completely extinct in the suffocating heat of their own making? We may never mathematically, physically know for absolute sure if the terrifying PETM event was a natural catastrophe or an artificial, self-inflicted apocalypse, but simply looking so closely at the exact, undeniable chemical signature of an ancient, devastating mass extinction permanently forces us to directly confront a completely horrifying, unyielding truth about our own current, highly volatile trajectory. We build our world in heavy stone and steel because we biologically crave permanence. We want to be remembered. But the chilling reality of the Silurian hypothesis teaches us that civilization is ultimately ephemeral. The Earth is a violently efficient, self-cleaning oven. No matter how advanced we become, our ultimate legacy will realistically be nothing more than a microscopic chemical anomaly permanently trapped in a razor-thin layer of deep rock. But this realization immediately leaves us with a massive, haunting question. If the planet completely deletes all physical evidence of our existence, what exactly happens 300 million years from now? When the next intelligent species inevitably evolves and begins digging curiously into the crust, will they mathematically know we were here? Or will they confidently, arrogantly think they are the absolute first?